And let me once again welcome everybody officially to today's online event, Creating Your Most Effective Sustainability Strategy, What Cities and Counties Can Do for You. Or excuse me, what cities and counties can do. This event is sponsored by Greener Applications and by the Government Innovators Network. And without further ado, I'd like to turn things over to today's moderator, Gerry DeSeve, who is the president of Greener Applications. Mr. DeSeve.
Thanks, Jim. And welcome, everybody. We are so excited to be doing this along with Harvard and the Ash Institute. It's just really a great opportunity for us to hear what folks are most interested in terms of creating a sustainability strategy. And I really am going to direct the questions that you've got to the panel that we have here so that the burning issues that are out there in the audience can be put out there and handled by some real experts in the field. Myself, I've been part of the presidential transition team for housing and urban development during the Obama transition. I am a columnist for Governing Magazine and also a blogger. I have a blog called the Leaderboard Index, and the Leaderboard, which tracks the intersection of management and sustainability. You saw a little bit more about my bio, but my whole background has been in working in strategy and with local governments. So this is really a great opportunity for me to talk about some of the things that I've been seeing, to introduce you to some folks who have also been out working in the field and hear from you about what you'd like to know more about. So what Jim's got up on the screen now is where folks are from. It looks like we've got mostly representation from city and local government. And so, Jim, it looks like things are a little blocked. Maybe you've got two windows open?
Oh, yep.
Thanks.
Sorry about that, Gerry.
It's okay. Mostly city government, some local folks in there as well with the cities. County government is the next government group, and then state government at about 4%. So this gives you a sense of who's sitting alongside you in the virtual audience here. The next question is, have you created a greenhouse gas inventory yet? It looks like we're sort of equal on that we've got a third, and a third. This is one of the key first steps in creating a sustainability strategy. Once you understand what your greenhouse gases look like, where they're coming from, you can then begin to make very strategic decisions about what to do to lower those emissions, keeping with all of the different commitments that you've already made in terms of your organizational or your city's mission and focus, where you've got money to spend, where you'd like to be getting new money from. So it's a critical first step. What we did in the next question, in terms of where the climate program is used ICLEI's 5 milestones for sustainability strategies. This is a roadmap that they've created that goes from the very beginning of not really being part of a sustainability program all the way through to monitoring and verifying. It sounds like folks have mainly in the group of they have or are in the middle of developing a local climate action plan. That's a great place to be. This is exactly who we were hoping to have on this call. If you've already put your plan together, and it looks like we've got about 18% in those last two categories, those folks are going to hear a lot on this call about strategies that people have developed that have been seen by folks at ICLEI, at the U.S. Green Building Council, things that I've seen, things that Princeton Energy has seen. So we'll really be trying to share best practices, help folks get new ideas, talk about specific cases so that you've got a better idea of what's working in other jurisdictions that you might be able to apply yourself. If you are still working on this, if it's something that's sort of an upcoming event, you're going to hear a lot of new innovative ideas about sustainability, different kinds of approaches to sustainability that you'll be able to work into your plan, work into the discussions that you've got with your leadership, and really inform how you put together your sustainability plan. This is a great event for folks who are still working on things. Can we go to the next question? And we really wanted to see what people were most interested in learning about. When we got everyone's comments, and there were about 200 folks who registered for the call, we saw a really broad array of what seemed to be of most interest. Just trying to figure out where to get started, doing funding and application grants, trying to get some of the energy efficiency money that's out there from the stimulus plan, all the way to how do we handle things like sanitation and wastewater. So we asked this question really to get a sense of where folks are looking to get answers right now. So it's going to be strategies and policies that we'll focus on, as well as funding opportunities, really helping folks look at how they can take a strategy and make sure that it's actually paid for. And then the last question was, the next to last question, Jim. Was what have you done already? What kind of things apply? There are a lot of members of ICLEI. That's great. A lot of people have signed up for commitments such as the Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement. If you're in the audience and you haven't done that yet, or you haven't heard about ICLEI or the Conference of Mayors Climate Protection Agreement, it's a great place to get started. It's what you should start thinking about immediately after you've done an inventory is what sort of broader networks are there out there that you might be able to tap into and take advantage of as resources that will really help you go from the beginning all the way through to having a successful program. And ICLEI has an incredible set of tools, a lot of different resources, a lot of people who are available to help you. And then U.S. Conference of Mayors Climate Protection Agreement has been signed by about 920 mayors now, committing their cities to dramatically reducing their greenhouse gas emissions, if not entirely eliminating them. And they are doing an incredible amount of work around that in terms of supporting communication efforts, really talking to different parties about what they've been doing, sharing best practices, sharing solutions, so that really there's a whole group of folks that are continually in conversation about how their cities can be more sustainable, again, all being driven by the Conference of Mayors. Energy service contractors are something that we're going to talk about. It's a really interesting, risk-free way for cities and local governments, state governments, to get into new energy efficiency programs that they might not be able to afford in terms of their capital budgets, but that they can implement with the help of these specialized companies called energy service companies that provide all of the efficiency tools that you'd need, but they're paid by the efficiency itself. In other words, as your energy bill goes down, they'll take part of that savings and apply it to their own payment. And so you can get a lot of upgrades, you can get a lot of great ideas about how to lower your energy bills without needing to make any kind of an investment or put a budget towards it. It's just a service contract. So again, Princeton will be talking about that later on. One of the things that we're seeing is that more and more regional registries for greenhouse gas emissions are cropping up. This is another kind of resource or another kind of tool to tap into if you believe that it's going to be important for your organization or different constituents within your locality to actually begin reporting greenhouse gas emissions up. Then you can join a registry, you get all of the tools needed to take your inventory that you've done and take all of the data and show everyone what's happened or what's happening in your area. And that can be used for things like cap and trade, which is helping energy companies really level off the use of fossil fuels and increase their sustainability by incenting them not to pollute more, not to create more greenhouse gas emissions, but instead reduce their overall emissions so that they can trade that almost like a currency with other organizations that are participating in a cap and trade program. This is something, for example, that's very active in the Northeast. New York State has been a real leader in this. Pennsylvania has been a participant in the global registry for a couple of years now. But participation in this doesn't cost anything, but you get a lot of resources. You can compare and benchmark with other organizations that are on the registry as well. So it's another kind of tool, another kind of outlet for information that you might be coming up with. And no one's at cap and trade yet, That's very interesting. It's something that's definitely on the horizon. It's out there. It's not really exactly clear how much governments are going to be able to participate in terms of actually offloading their excess credits to entities that would be paying for them. But it is clear that local governments are going to have a big role in reporting, and that state governments and to a certain degree the federal government in terms of reporting are all going to be very actively involved in what's going on. So it's an interesting area that's going to be developing and that you're probably going to be hearing more about. It's a real focus of the Obama administration right now. And then the last question, Jim? Yep. We just wanted to see who else was on the call. It looks like there are a couple of extra folks here, so we've got 49 participants right now. There are probably some more folks who've joined ever since we got started. So with that, what I'd like to do is really just introduce the rest of the panel. We're going to hear from Michelle Moore, who's the Senior Vice President of the U.S. GBC for Policy, Missy Stults, who is the ICLE Climate Program Project Manager, and Dave Smith, who is the President and CEO of Princeton Energy Solutions. So with that, Michelle, I'm going to let you kind of step through your slides and your bio.
Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yes, you're back.
Okay. You guys can see my bio slide there, so I won't read everything to you, but I will just share a little bit in terms of my background that's not on here. And I've been with U.S. Green Building Council for about 6 years. So I've had the opportunity from this vantage point and from being in the construction industry overall for about a dozen years. When I say that, it always freaks me out just a little bit. To see the green building movement component of this really take hold. And even over the course of the past 2 years to see public policy adoptions and really the diversity and innovative quality of those policy adoptions really accelerate. So I know that there's been some discussion as to where the tipping point is in this community, and there have been many ideas about when we've passed different milestones. But I believe certainly where we are today in terms of focusing on retrofitting as an effective tool in terms of climate change policy, and I'll also share a little bit about the economic development component of that with you as we're talking about stimulus and talking about some of the policies that are on the table for the future. I noticed on the slides on the survey tool that 60+% of all the folks on this call already have lead policies in place. So I'm going to kind of cut to the chase in terms of some of the introductory ideas that I was planning on sharing. And so Jim, I know that you're clicking through the slides for me. So if you can go from my bio directly up to the slide at the end that's urgency, that's just sort of a background slide, and I'll talk through the program. Thank you. Thank you very much. So from USGBC's perspective, and and what we're seeing in the market overall right now as well, what we're looking to drive in terms of policy perspective is a real focus on the existing buildings marketplace. As I'm sure, particularly those of you who already have extensive experience working with the Green Building Program, that's where the gain is in terms of climate, and that's certainly where the chief gains are in terms of cost savings as well. The McKinsey survey that was out last November, that's been circulated very broadly and that's in the process of being updated right now, identified $160 billion at minimum of cost savings from cost-effective energy efficiency measures that could be gained between now and 2030 while meeting 85% of our future new energy demands. So that's an extraordinary number, and it's extraordinarily hard to go after as well. There are something like 126 million residences and commercial buildings in the United States. And two challenges proceed from that, from implementing effective local policies perspective, I'm sure many of you have experienced. One is just the challenge of disaggregation. There's so many different parties that you have to reach out to drive behavior change, to get the efficiencies associated with climate. It is a tremendous challenge. And the other thing had been in the economic environment that we were in, when things were going really great, it was really difficult to get people's attention. because it's unfortunately very easy to be irrational with what's perceived to be small amounts of money. You know, if you've got a big commercial building and you're pulling in $100 million in revenue from rents a year, saving $100,000 on your utility bill just may not seem like enough money to do the work that it would take and to make the changes that it would take to go after that. You know, what we have seen is a tremendous acceleration in the interest and the willingness to look deeply at existing buildings, both residentially and commercially, since the market started to turn down. So I won't trouble with you all the detailed stats that go into that. We do have references available online to talk through it. And there's some other policy changes that are obviously driving that as well. The first, of course, is the Recovery Act. And Jim, if you could just pop up the Excel sheet so we can have that just as a reference tool. So in terms of the Recovery Act, you know, there's an extraordinary amount of money, billions and billions of dollars, that are there that are being invested in different components of the built environment and through different mechanisms too, you know, ranging from the dollars that have gone into weatherization through HUD, the $8.8 billion that were made available to schools for renovations, repairs, and green building certification through the State Stabilization Act, to the investment in federal buildings that will ultimately pay benefits to local economies through economic development. You know, what's been challenging even for us to track through a very focused effort is how those dollars can be accessed, because the mechanisms and the contacts, the intents are so tremendously varied. And as a resource, there are a couple of things that USGBC has put together that I hope would be helpful to you in considering how you might be able to implement green building programs as a component of your climate strategy if it's not something that you've already contemplated or undertaken, or to expound upon what you may already be doing with your own buildings or through incentive policies locally to really go at the existing building marketplace, because retrofitting, again, is a focus of the dollars that have been invested through the Recovery Act. You know, the matrix that you see in front of you now includes a couple of pieces of useful information, and utility to the state and local government community is really what this was meant to be. Program name, funding description, additional information, which in all cases includes everything that we know about what the funding application process is like and what dollars remain available. And we've also included resources that relate specifically to the types of programs that are being funded through the Recovery Act. And that ranges from tools for schools, you know, if expanding a green building program, particularly a green building retrofitting program for your public schools is on the menu of local priorities. You know, there are materials ranging from archived webinars and best practices from places like the state of Ohio that have many years of experience doing green retrofits on schools and have economic case information available. You know, what the payback periods are, what the top investments have been, and what financing mechanisms they've used, and what they anticipate their overall payback period for the program to be, which is they're putting in $6 billion. They anticipate having $4 billion of that back within 10 years, which is a pretty good ROI. To broader tools, which goes back to a program that we actually developed in conjunction with probably some of the localities on the call, with ICLAI and with other partners from the nonprofit community, called the Green Playbook. And it's a comprehensive set of best practices for cities and for localities who are interested in implementing green community programs. So it includes ideas and examples of ideas and implementation that address single buildings, as well as broader community policy like purchasing practices, transit, and economic development programs. There's one other thing that I would mention that's available as a tool, and that's just a program that we've put together on top 10 ways to use recovery funds for green building. And one that's worth calling out, and that's not specifically mentioned in a lot of the policy documentation, is building capacity through education and training. And again, those of you with focused experience in the built environment have probably experienced this locally, is that there's a a fairly significant gap in capacity to deliver on a lot of the need for retrofitting, particularly with dollars flowing into that community now. A good example is that even in the past week I've talked to two major developers who have said, and this is probably something that's never been said in my lifetime anyway, that although they're developers who are focused extensively on new construction, that their building for the near future is going to be, or their business for the near future rather, is going to be retrofitting. And having people trained, having skilled labor trained, who know how to do everything from going in and doing the audits and assessments to the building engineering work that's required to do to implement effectively the results from a retro commissioning program, for instance, is non-trivial. So looking at the dollars that have been made available through the Recovery Act for developing community college programs, for instance, or for retraining displaced workers can be a great way to support not just the climate program and the climate goals that you already have set for your city, but also for helping to retrain and reemploy component of the local workforce. Because one of the great things about construction and building jobs in general is that they are fundamentally local. They can't be exported. And reemploying those folks, getting them moving again, getting people who've been unemployed from the housing sector moving again is a wonderful way to obviously to build up the local economy. Two things that we see looking into the future as well, and these are ideas that would be supportive of local and state programs that are currently moving forward as a component of the energy climate legislation. The first that I would mention that is a very, very innovative idea that's been bubbling up from among localities, some of which have already implemented this very successfully include Babylon, New York, Berkeley, California, and also institutions, campuses like Harvard. And that's the idea of utilizing a revolving loan fund to fuel building retrofitting. One of the challenges, of course, today to retrofitting large numbers of commercial or residential buildings is just access to financing. And although there are lots and lots of savings there to be reaped, savings that from a commonsensical perspective should be able to finance an investment today, the state of the real estate industry and the state of our capital markets makes that almost impossible in most cases unless you have the dollars in your own pocket to spend or you're at the very tip top of credit rating, and even then it's not such a sure thing. And for homeowners, it's even more challenging, again, because of the disaggregation and oftentimes the small dollar volume that you're talking about. It's just difficult to get credit because you're not a terribly interesting customer to a bank. But what places like Babylon, New York have done is create a self-financing revolving loan fund that in their case uses a tax lien structure that's attached to their property taxes to enable the city effectively to finance low interest or no interest in some other cases retrofits to homes and to commercial buildings, including small commercial buildings, in such a way that the obligation follows the home, not the individual homeowner, because of the tie into property taxes. Sometimes it is, again, as those of you who've worked in the built environment know, that the payback period can be long enough that it extends past the typical period of home ownership. If you've got a 10-year payback on a great energy investment, but the person who's living in the house doesn't know that they're going to be there that long, they're typically not going to take on consumer credit to finance that. Tying it to the property tax structure enables you to make longer-term decisions. And there's a provision that's moving through the Congress right now that would provide seed funding for states and localities to be able to develop revolving loan fund programs of their own. And what's particularly interesting about that is that there's the possibility of tying it into revenue from cap-and-trade auctions if the energy bill goes through concurrently with cap-and-trade provisions in the climate legislation. And that would make that program much more economically sustainable over the long haul and do something that hasn't been done very effectively in policy suggestions before, either in the United States at a federal level, of course, or internationally, and that is finding a way to recognize and prioritize in the context of a federal approach to climate change legislation. The fact that the built environment and literally investing in our communities, investing in our schools, investing in our homes, and investing in the structure of the places that we live, work, and go to school have got to be a part of the solution set because nationally it represents 39% of CO2 emissions, and in many major cities like in New York City, for instance, it's almost 80% of the total CO2 footprint. There are other provisions that are going to be coming up that are worth being aware of as well that provide grant funding to create programs that would invest directly through matching funds based on performance for retrofits for residences, for retrofits for small office and commercial, and for retrofitting for larger office and commercial as well. The final thing that I would mention that would speed the plow, so to speak, is the development or the thought to develop, it's again in legislation that's currently moving through Congress, a national model building performance label that would complement the existing Energy Star program and give localities a national model that they would be able to pull from if there was an interest in creating a performance label program. So similar to buying a car and seeing what the miles per gallon are supposed to be, if you were buying a new home, if you were looking at buying a commercial building, you would be able to see what the energy consumption is so that you would know as a homeowner, for instance, not only how much you're going to be paying on your mortgage every month, but what more the true cost of home ownership is. So you'd see what your utility bill was going to look like in the wintertime when it was really cold, or what your AC bill was going to look like in the summertime when it was really hot. So there's a tremendous wealth of resources that are available. Many of those are posted on USGBC's website, and actually the matrix that's up on the screen will be linked to the resources page from this webinar. But other resources include the Green Playbook that I mentioned, also top 10 ways to use stimulus funds for green building. That includes case studies and link to economic and business cases associated with program implementation as well. And finally, an archive series of webinars with the Clinton Climate Initiative and USGBC that go into some depth about how localities can use alternative financing mechanisms like a revolving loan fund to really leverage not only the federal stimulus funds, but also leverage private capital that may be available in the community to extend the effectiveness of the dollars to make programs more financially sustainable and ultimately to drive greater results. Thank you.
Missy, thank you. What we'd like to do now is begin using the questions feature. If you can start putting questions in so that when we're done with the next two short presentations, what we can do is start answering those and make sure that you are getting everything that you'd like to get out of these different panelists. So please feel free to start submitting questions, and we'll make sure that the ones that have already been submitted are answered first. And I'm going to hand it over to Missy Stults.
Excellent. Hi, everyone. Let me just call this up. My name is Missy Stults, and I work for ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, and I'm going to move very quickly through the presentation itself. In fact, all of the slides will be posted on the resource page, like Michelle mentioned. So for those of you who aren't quite as familiar with ICLEI and the work that we do, please feel free to have a look at this. I provide just a little bit of context. The other place to look is icleiusa.org, and you can find out more. The big picture point is that ICLEI is, sorry the slide is a little messed up, but ICLEI is an international membership association of local governments that are committed to climate protection and sustainable development. From the poll, I know that many of you are members of ICLEI, which means that you are working through most likely climate mitigation work. Now, ICLEI focuses on a number of different campaigns. I'm with ICLEI USA. So here in the U.S., we focus primarily on climate mitigation, sustainable development, and climate adaptation, or preparing for the impacts of climate change. We do have campaigns overseas. For example, in Africa, our water campaign and our biodiversity campaigns are very popular. So we have a lot of resources. But focusing specifically on mitigation, these are the 5 milestones for climate protection or for mitigation that our members move through. So that question really helped us to identify where you are in this process. I was originally going to talk to you about the importance of inventorying for those of you who don't have an inventory, but it sounds like many of you do or have moved past that. So I'm going to leave this slide up in the background, and you're welcome to take a look about why it's really important, critically important actually, to do a greenhouse gas emissions inventory. And in fact, for those of you who are pursuing funding from the federal government, you do have to have, there's a strong criteria for having a baseline energy performance done. So you do need to have a greenhouse gas inventory either done or in the works as you apply for funding. So it's critically important. ICLEI has a number of tools and resources that we've developed. Our audience, again, is local governments. So for local governments, we've got a software tool, we've got a standard on how to do inventories, and that's part of our job here is to help you move through inventorying as well. We have, I'm just going to go back again, the five milestones. So inventorying is one of the critical things that you have to start with, but we've got resources that move you through all of these different phases, from doing your inventory to setting an emissions reduction target to developing your climate action plan. And it looks like about 45% of you are in that phase right now. So what I want to talk about are the resources that are available right now to help you do a climate action plan and to fund the measures you identify in your climate action plan. So things to look out for. If you're an ICLEI member, you have access to a tool that we have called the Climate and Air Pollution Planning Assistant that basically allows you to go in and put in local circumstance, what your baseline emissions are, what your emissions reduction target is, and then some other factors. For example, how much money do you have to invest in action planning? And then this can spit out measures that seem to align with where you are and give you background information. If it's a policy, for example, maybe it'll give you 15 measures. 3 of them might be policies. For those 3 policies, it'll actually give you example policies that you can take and tailor and move forward with. And it's a tool that's right now, it was developed with the EPA, and it's being updated so it'll be web-based, meaning it'll be live. So it'll constantly be updated as we evolve in this field and new standards move forward. Other things to note, specifically about funding. On the ICLEI website, check out a guide that we've recently developed on revolving energy funds. So this is something you certainly can use your funding from the federal government and the Recovery Act to establish. Basically, it's a pool of money that you just continue drawing from that finances energy efficiency or clean energy installations, and then you replenish the pool by the savings you achieve from those installations. So this guidebook talks about how to set up a fund. We have series on how to start an energy office. We've got a clean energy toolkit that goes live in 2.5 weeks. Basically talks about everything clean energy related. How do you purchase, promote, finance, and install clean energy? We've got a green school bus toolkit that's available. And that's more relevant on the side in terms of there is funding specifically for diesel retrofits. So that school bus has some resources to help you. A school bus toolkit has resources to help you in that area. As Michelle mentioned, the Green Playbook is a great place to take a look at. And again, all of these are on the ICLEI USA website. And the last thing I want to leave you with as a teaser, and I could talk for a while about the importance of inventorying or resources to help you move forward with climate action planning, but I'd rather get your specific questions on that. So the last thing to look forward to is in June, we are going to be doing a series on innovative financing to do energy efficiency at the residential level. And Michelle mentioned Babylon and Berkeley. Both of those will be key speakers talking about their programs. For Babylon, the Long Island Green Homes program. For Berkeley, the Berkeley First model, and Boulder as well will be speaking, we hope. And that'll be a series starting in June and moving forward. Just you can listen in, hear what your colleagues are doing in regards to financing and how those strategies may be applicable in your community. So those are just a few things to keep you guys going. Also check out the ICLEI USA website. We do have a sort of a comprehensive summary of the Recovery Act and how local governments can access that funding. And I'll make sure to post that link on the resources page after so everyone can take a look if you're interested. And that is my whirlwind overview. Yeah.
And please do submit your questions. We've got about 6 right now. We'd love to have a lot more, so we've got plenty queued up for when Dave and I are done with our short presentations here. Dave, why don't you go ahead and go next?
Thank you, Gerry. There we are. Go back. Previous. There we are. Greetings, everyone. My name is David Smith. I'm CEO and founder of Princeton Energy Systems, and have been at this for a few years. Started Princeton Energy Systems in 1999 to try to bring a holistic systems approach to the complex set of challenges that building owners, towns, cities, colleges face relative to reducing their environmental and energy footprint to the greatest extent possible and cost effective. So without much more ado about that, I'll try to move quickly also. I only have a couple of slides. Wanted to give you an overview of what Princeton Energy Systems does and not spend much time there before we get into some of the things we do around our approach and what we believe is a new paradigm around energy and sustainability. We're sustainability consultants, engineers, and planners with a strong focus on energy. And principally, we're focused on the built environment. We are technology neutral, and we act as gatekeepers, so owner engineers and advisors to help sort out what we consider to be a lot of noise and a lot of conversation, a lot of sales and development and technology evolution in the green energy space. We help make sense of that. We have a broad and deep background in a lot of different aspects of energy, to include and first and foremost efficiency. We do a lot of work with renewables, a pretty broad spectrum there as well, solar, wind, biogas, and to include micro hydro and run-of-river. We also have a pretty strong expertise in on-site generation, both solar, renewable, and cogeneration using both gas, natural gas, and biogas principally, but also some biomass. One of the primary things we help compile and put together for our customers are energy and sustainability master plans, and they're certainly hard to differentiate the energy master plan and the sustainability plan, but there's a clear focus that we have to take, given our expertise on the importance of energy relative to carbon. So we focus on the energy, but it's all about sustainability in the end. And another important thing that we do, and might be relevant to what we know is relevant to counties and municipalities, is we help sort through the energy service company offerings, the guaranteed savings performance contracts, and we optimize those for our customers. So moving on, our approach to energy and sustainability is to build a foundation at the outset. This is one of the critical first steps that have to be taken, and along with, and I'll quickly add, going for the low-hanging fruit. So this is a parallel path that can be undertaken, but it has to be emphasized that building a data foundation is really critical, so that proper assessments can be made about what makes sense and what is the path that is best to go down based on the information today. So the data becomes information. Information is ideas, and then you act and learn with any luck. We also think it's critically important to understand that there are a wide range of assets that have to be understood and maximized. And we look at buildings and roofs and land and infrastructure as energy assets in many respects. Energy assets, a building is an energy asset to the extent that it can be mined for savings. Roofs can be host to large solar arrays. Land can be a source of biomass, a source of an area where large solar arrays can be deployed. And infrastructure can be combined and maximized and integrated to achieve very extensive energy savings. Rivers, lakes, mountains, farms, wastewater, landfills, they all sort of speak for themselves, but in many cases, and we've had this experience where the value and the benefit of those natural assets is not really understood from an energy perspective and not maximized. Based on all that, we look to optimize and plan. This is around looking at how technologies can be integrated, current known technologies. How do you anticipate what technologies are on the forefront, and what fundamentally is going to move the carbon needle? Where are you going to get your big bang for the buck? And what are the order of operation? What comes first? And how do you do things in an order that makes sense and doesn't constrain you going down the road? And when we look at the road, we're talking 10, 40, 50 years. So thinking this through and having an understanding of what's going to move the needle and what are the order of operations is critically important. Lots of money out there from lots of places, and how do you maximize the various pieces? There's incentives and rebates and low-cost financing, but there's also the different project structures, and this is where we see ESCOs and third-party funding and third-party structures, build-own operators, and power purchase agreements, and I can explain some of those things in question and answer, but there's lots of ways to leverage other private and public money. Implementation and management, not trivial. If you don't do that well, you're going to be stuck with a lot of projects and activities that don't achieve their potential. And then measure and verify. This is critical because you're not going to know what works if you're not really actively measuring and compiling your success and learning from your mistakes. From our perspective, we see that the shift to sustainability really represents a new paradigm, and it's broader than just around climate. It's from our view of things, this is a growing understanding that what we're doing now is really not sustainable, and that it's possible to re-engineer the way things are done, the way buildings are constructed, systems are implemented and designed, and how to that reordering priorities and values is a critical part of that as well, and ultimately rethinking how plans and processes are put in place. So I'm happy to and look forward to answering questions about your energy issues and your energy opportunities.
Thanks, Dave. So we've done my bio. Wanted to talk a little more about what Greener Applications does, and I'll do that very quickly so that we can get to your questions. We've got a lot of great questions coming in, and I'd like to get to that part as fast as possible. So what we do is really follow very closely what folks like the USGBC and ICLEI, the mayors, and the Climate Protection Agreement are doing, as well as all the subject matter experts out in the field, and try to create very simple carbon accounting solutions or greenhouse gas tracking solutions that enable cities and local governments to comply with all of the things that are going on, or to, at a minimum, really baseline themselves so that you can ultimately measure and verify what's going on. Essentially, we're like greenhouse gas accountants. We've got a QuickBooks-like tool so that you can very quickly enter in all of your information about your utilities, about your greenhouse gas emissions if you have that information, about your fleets and their fuel use, and get a great tracking of all of those things over time so that you can see how they're contributing to your overall carbon footprint. That's Greener Apps. We have an accounting solution where basically you can just ship us a shoebox full of your old utility bills and odometer readings, and what we do is give you back a great executive-style greenhouse gas inventory report that you can share with your constituents, that you can use internally for really targeting where you think you can get the best bang for your buck in terms of lowering your emissions. And it also tells you where you've been spending your energy money. Has it been going towards buildings? Has it been going towards exterior activity? Where are the real hits taking place, so that you can begin managing your energy as well, not just your emissions. That also, at both levels, will look at, and this is Greener Apps as well as the Greener Accountant, help you look at things like Energy Star, where you are with that, help you score that. We can do lead scoring as well, so you've got a sense of how you might go about doing retrofits that would ultimately get you to LEED certification. And then the last piece is Greener Pathway. This is really a consulting solution where we come in and in a very collaborative way, work with you, work with your stakeholders, and as many folks as you can gather to come up with a baseline sustainability strategy, really figure out what the low-hanging fruit is, the best places to get started, how to really get traction, and then follow up on that so that you can go deep in the areas where you'd really like to go deep. Is it energy efficiency education? Is it that you'd really like to find an energy service company and lower the risk of becoming more energy efficient? Is it that you'd like to develop a LEED policy and sort of set teams on those different tracks so that you get really good focused results quickly and are in constant contact and collaborating with your stakeholders at the same time? So that's who we are. As panelists, we've heard about who you are as the attendees, the audience, and now I'd really like to get to your questions. The first one was, if we put out an RFP for assistance in creating our energy strategy, how can we be sure that those responding are actually qualified? And I'm going to answer that just because it really dovetails nicely with the kinds of things that we do. It's very difficult to come up with a good list of vendors who really have qualifications. And I've been involved in doing work with state and local governments for a long time now, and finding vendors who really are qualified is always hard. But because this is a new industry, because this is a new area for writing an RFP, it's always difficult. So at the outset, you really want to make sure that you've got good people in the organization who are going to be working directly with you. The key qualification is how talented are the folks who are going to be working on the project, and how well are they going to be working with your team. You want to make sure that you've got someone who isn't just there as window dressing in the proposal, but is going to leave very quickly after the work begins. So you want to have someone who's a key person, who's qualified, who's done this kind of work before and has really good background. And then you want to make sure that the company has been successful. You want to have some years of experience if that's where you really think the background would come from, or you want to make sure that they've done similar projects to what you're doing yourself and what you're looking at doing. Dave, is there anything that you'd add to that? You've worked with everyone from the GSA at the federal level to folks in New Jersey, helping them do very sophisticated renewable and energy management projects. How do you think that it's best to select a vendor who's really qualified?
Well, there's got to be a certain fairly broad base of experience. Energy encompasses technology, finance, business structure, regulations, and regulatory requirements. So that you've got to really identify folks who have been at it for a while and have touched a lot of the different aspects. There's a lot of companies that are fairly focused on procurement or efficiency. I think you really want to sort out where the breadth and depth is, and just bring in a qualifications. Do an RFQ first, and see what you find, and then sort through that. But there are firms out there. It's not a crowded space, we don't think at the moment, but there are firms out there that come at it from a couple of different directions. But they do exist, and you can find help.
Great, thank you. The next question is for Michelle. The question is, can you explain why USGBC in the LEED standard has given credits for renewable energy credit in terms of going for LEED certification and not offset programs? And the feeling from the person asking the question was that it was their understanding that the programs for offsets are more verifiable than those focused on new installation, in terms of dealing with new installation emissions than renewable energy credits.
So if I can ask just for a little bit of a clarification, so for offsets, you mean like purchasing carbon offsets?
Correct.
Well, I know that, well, a couple of things. Number one, when this question's been raised in the context of the technical committee discussions, there's been a lot of concern about consistent, verifiable quality among different types of offsets, and that there had not yet emerged a referenceable standard that USGBC would be able to look to as it relates to the LEED credits to say, it needs to at least meet this test, because purchasing theoretical trees or really investing in programs that are going to push back the needle are two very different strategies and have different level of verifiability associated with each of them. But that said, there is precedent in the context of the rating system for recognizing zero carbon or lower carbon strategies in the innovation and design credits. The innovation and design credits is really where experimentation happens. So we can test things out to see how they work before they get incorporated into the body of the rating system. Two examples I know of specifically, one that USGBC invested in itself with the offsetting that we did for Greenville travel last year, was the Enterprise Community Partners program that connects carbon offsets specifically with project-level investment in affordable green housing. And the second one is a program that's available through a carpet manufacturer that certifies the flooring product to be carbon neutral. So, there is precedent as it relates to innovation and design credit. There is precedent related to USGBC's own activities as an organization. And so that if that's something that you want to pursue, look to the innovation and design credits. And, I'd be happy to talk with you offline about, the specifics of how to do that, or connect you with, someone who can speak with you in more technical detail about how to go about it.
And I'll just add to that a little bit, which is in LEED itself, those are really kind of two different areas in terms of reducing carbon and having renewable energy credits. The renewable energy credits are really supposed to encourage the use of renewables, and it's separate from lowering overall greenhouse gas emissions. So they're kind of two different issues a little bit.
Good point.
I want to go to the next question, which was very long, and I'm going to try to sum it up. And Missy, if you wouldn't mind answering this one, the question is, given the scope of the problem and given that we really need to have great programs for state and local governments that include measurable outcomes, are we, as a country, as a group of governments, moving fast enough? Are we going to be able to address this challenge well enough, given where we are right now and all of the activity that you're seeing going on?
That's an incredible question. It's also a very complicated question. The answer has to be yes, because I don't think I could wake up in the morning if I thought the answer was ultimately no. That's more philosophical. Realistically, what we're seeing are local governments that are truly concerned about this issue and taking very proactive steps. And we have local governments, in the ICLEI network, that's where I'm going to draw from. We have those who are leading this charge by far, who are really setting innovative standards and policies, who are willing on putting their feet to the fire. And they're the ones who are paving the way for the rest of us to sort of move forward. I think there's no question that we need to get there, and the scientific imperative is there. And the local level has moved this charge in the U.S. With the new federal administration, we're starting to see the support that we didn't have previously, mostly financially. That's going to help, I think, really jumpstart the innovativeness that's happening. And it's really happening, I think, at the local level, at the grassroots level. So yes.
Good. What I've been hearing is, and this is from vendors, it's from schools, it's from government officials, is that the tide really has shifted as a result of the stimulus money, as a result of the new focus being brought on by the administration. There is just a groundswell of support that has been waiting to pop, and it's popping now. So that what we're going to see are a lot of innovative folks coming out of the woodwork, a lot of people who really are going to move quickly forward in a way that they weren't able to do that before. And I think it's going to be really remarkable to see. I think that we're going to begin to establish, as Dave said, a new paradigm for how things are going to happen, and really be able to kind of remake the measurement, remake business strategy, remake goals and objectives in a way that they not only address sustainability but are better than what we've seen before, because we have to, because there is such an imperative for handling climate change and really improving the situation as much as we can, as quickly as we can. Next question here is...
Oh, this is Missy. Can I add just one more thing to that?
Oh, sure.
And that's that we're starting to see a cultural shift where individuals, green is starting to move from a trend to the standard. And once we reach that, where green is, you just have to be green. It's no longer a fad or something that the wealthy do. It just is. When we get there, we'll have succeeded. And I think we're starting to see that shift in many ways.
Yeah, that's happening. I would only add that what's encouraging to us, because we also work, this is Dave, we work with colleges and universities, and part of their mission, many of them, 600 plus, have signed a carbon neutral goal. 600 colleges have committed to that. That they're about that whole process starts with at some fundamental level of creating that culture of sustainability, and it no longer, as Missy said, is a fad or derided as tree hugging and what have you. It's really the norm. So the norms are shifting, and the culture is shifting. And I also have to say that the technology is shifting. I'm optimistic. We're sort of technology focused in a lot of ways in what we do. So we see and are encouraged by a lot of the technology that both exists today and that's on the horizon as far as being able to really drive down energy impact. And it's not just about technology, it's also about fuel and some of the things I touched on in my points.
And funding is going to become more innovative and be more interesting at the same time. The ESCO model of lowering risk while also giving you the kinds of things you need is a really compelling one, especially for state and local governments. And I believe that there are going to be a lot of folks who are going to look at organizations on a 360-degree basis and figure out how to bring forward the capital for projects and take the risk themselves, but then reap the rewards alongside the customer, and really have services that are much more public-private partnerships or service agreements that help folks implement projects that they wouldn't be able to implement by going through a typical budgeting and capital programming kind of cycle. So hopefully that will speed things up as well. And the money is critical, but also the approach and bringing that in the right way is going to be critical. The next question, and this is going to be for Missy and Michelle, is can you, just in a couple of minutes, give us a sense of how you're organized in the states and down at the local level so that people know where to go to make contact with your organization. And this was actually a specific request also to have some folks come to Minnesota and go to the League of Minnesota Cities Conference in late June. So if you know of someone who's available in Minnesota or from your headquarters to go do that, please let them know that as well.
Okay, this is Michelle. And USGBC, in addition to the national organization that's headquartered here in Washington with satellite offices out in San Diego, we have 78 chapters around the country, typically one near you. So the best first stop for information about USGBC and green building programs is typically your local chapter. And there is actually a chapter in Minnesota because they have a great local perspective. They're practitioners who are already connected to the community, and they have a tremendous amount of expertise. USGBC also has specific focused resources here at our DC offices to support state and local efforts. On the advocacy side, Roger Limoges and his team focus on developing best practices in public policy, information sharing, and developing a network among local policymakers and government leaders. And then Melissa Gallagher-Rogers and her team focus on technical support. That's a unique need typically for state and local governments that are looking to implement green building in their own practices. So in terms of being able to connect at the conference that you have upcoming in June, I'd be happy to talk further about best resources, be they local or be they have someone come in from one of the state and local teams here at our DC offices to talk about what's happening nationwide.
Yeah, and on the ITSC side, we have our headquarters are actually moving. For those who don't know, we were originally in Oakland, California, and later in June we will be transitioning to DC. But the way we generally operate is we have regional offices. So I'm out of the Boston office that supports our membership in the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic region. But we have an office in the Midwest, and that is actually housed in Chicago in City Hall. And the director of that office is Amy Malik. And if you would like to get in touch with me after, I'd be happy to put you two in contact, because I know Amy is doing a lot of outreach. She works specifically with municipalities in Minnesota.
Thank you. The next question is an interesting one, and I'm going to change it a little bit from the way that it was originally asked, which was just focused on homes, but I'm going to talk about the buildings as well. And I'd love to get everyone's take on this, but maybe if we can just do 1 or 2 minutes on it and move on. It's a question about zero energy buildings, and has anyone seen policies related to zero emission, zero energy buildings coming online? And if so, what is your view on those?
Do you want me to go ahead and start on that one, Gerry? Okay. What we've seen as it relates to policies related to zero emission buildings is there are many municipalities and states and even components of the federal government that have adopted the 2030 challenge. And the 2030 challenge requires all new buildings to be zero carbon in terms of their emissions by 2030. And the real activity that we see happening on that front right now is a lot of very significant R&D efforts going into trying to figure out how to do that, including really how to measure emissions associated with buildings, because there are quite a few challenges even in that arena when you really back it up and start looking at the carbon footprint of the materials, transportation, construction site management, etc. There's some wonderful buildings out there that have already achieved a documented level of GHG emissions reduction to put them at zero or a little bit better, primarily depending on on-site generation of renewable energy. And so there are some examples, but for the most part, the state of practice isn't yet at a level with sufficient capacity to be able to deliver that on a really broad scale. But again, sort of policies that look at future goals, policies that challenge edge-oriented leadership, policies that develop case study buildings as R&D projects are helpful towards helping us all understand how we move in that direction. It's definitely achievable. There are achievements in the market today, in the ground today, that demonstrate that. It just requires a much more fundamental rethinking of how we build buildings, how we source materials, and how we work together as an industry.
Would anyone else like to tackle that?
Well, I would just say from a technical standpoint that we think it's clearly possible on a production scale basis. It's one of the things we actually worked on in the 90s with less success, not because the technologies weren't there, but because the production home builders are really not on board, and there was no regulation requiring it. But we certainly think it's doable. It's a place where there can be significant impact going forward, and the value proposition to the home buyer in a mortgaged home is demonstrable in terms of net savings relative to increased cost of mortgage. So we think it's something that should be done, and it can be done.
Terrific. We've got a couple of questions about energy efficiency and conservation block grants. And I think the main thrust of them is how can you integrate sustainability and action planning into those applications as effectively as possible so that they really hit home with the folks who are going to be reviewing them. And maybe, Missy, if you could do that first, and then Michelle, if you could follow up with anything else.
Yeah, let me just making sure, is it specifically how we can integrate action planning into it, or is it, I mean, they want to get, is the question more, can we get funds to do action plans?
Yes, it's both. Are there funds available to do action plans, and then what are going to be the biggest areas of interest to the folks who are looking at those plans in terms of likelihood of getting a specific application funded?
Excellent.
You can
That's
answer
a great
either
question.
or.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. You know, this is off the top of my head too. That we work with the DOE pretty closely on getting some of those the criteria out. This is specifically for the direct allocations that have been given out because they haven't opened up the competitive portion of the grants yet. But for direct allocation, some of the important things are obviously job creation, energy savings and emissions reductions, and really importantly, think programs and not projects. They want something that's going to live past the funding period. They also want things that are shovel ready. So when you're preparing, it's really hard to say what is and is not going to be eligible because those are the criteria that the DOE has released so far, and they really don't want to stifle creativity in regards to what you move forward with. You just need to make sure that you meet those. So again, think about longevity. How is this going to sustain itself? Obviously create some jobs and reduce your energy consumption and emissions. So in that sense, a climate action plan could be a portion, but you need to tie that in, I would assume, to a broader program. So what? How are you going to implement the climate action plan? What's your strategy for moving that forward? Once you design it, how are you going to institutionalize it in your local government?
I think what I'd add to that before we get to Michelle is try to check as many boxes as you can. You heard Missy say a lot of different things simultaneously. It's about efficiency, it's about conservation, it's about green jobs. However, you can really make the case that you're not just doing something very specific, but instead really kind of considering all of the elements together so that you're creating a great program that really is interrelated and going to make a big impact across multiple different areas, I think is something that they're really looking for as well. That's the kind of creativity they're looking for, not just box checking. Michelle?
The only thing that I would add, I mean, and nothing specific to going after the funding, but would just be to mention an additional tool that may be helpful in this regard as you're getting ready to actually develop the climate change plan. And that's another effort that USGBC and ICLEI and about 200 other cities and organizations have been working on together. And that's the development of something that we're calling the STAR Community Index. And it's meant to be a set of guidelines or a compendium of best practices for implementing climate policies at the city scale. You know, oftentimes people refer to it as sort of like a lead for cities, and it's an easy way to think about it because it's guidelines for moving forward. Although there's not the idea that it would be attached to a rating or a certification process in the way that that LEAD is, but rather would be a really effective tool, you know, for moving forward and also for benchmarking best practices against other colleagues in cities and localities around the country. So the STAR effort is currently in development, anticipated to be out in pilot from ICLEI. Missy, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe sometime at the end of this year or early next year.
2010, actually.
2010. 2010. So next year. That's just around the corner. Just around the corner. But there's a lot of great work that's going into it already. So that may just be one more place that you can, you know, stretch your effort by looking to great work that's already been done by other people who have a lot of experience in this arena from among your colleagues and fellows in the city and state and federal policy community, and stretch the stimulus dollars even further.
Yeah, and for those who are ICLEI members, we have a forum on our website. It's basically like a member blog where members can talk to each other about what they're proposing for their funding, what are their strategies that they're actually bringing forward, and start talking to each other about those strategies. I'd really recommend you take a look at that and post your ideas so you can start discussing it. We do know leverage. The word leverage is very important. Leverage funding and leverage regional cooperation to move efforts forward. And anyone who's glutton for a punishment and wants to be on another conference call tomorrow at 2 p.m., ICLEI has regular conference calls with our partner climate communities, and tomorrow's conference call is on federal climate and energy policy.
Great. In terms of those same programs, how important is it going to be for cities and local governments to focus on their own buildings and really apply that money towards the infrastructure that they've got?
And that question specific to the stimulus dollars?
Yes.
But there is such a different variety of sources and mechanisms for going after stimulus dollars. Some of them are specifically laid out to be able to be invested in the municipalities' own buildings. And again, the detail for that is available in the matrix, and we're happy to help answer questions that you may have, even sort of going further than what's available in the public documents. There are a couple of different strategies that you would be able to undertake. None of the various granting provisions require achievement of a particular level of LEED certification, for instance, so you'd be able to pursue broad strategies based on what makes the best sense for your program. That could be, picking among a set of green strategies that you go after across a portfolio with your existing stock. Sort of moving towards higher and higher levels of performance. Or another recommendation that we have, again, sort of depending on what your particular needs are, is to look at retro commissioning as a strategy. Typically, we've seen case after case where energy performance improvements of between 10 and 12% are typical from going through a retro commissioning process, and that's fairly low-hanging fruit in terms of the level of investment that's required. And so there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of technical and other kinds of support that are available depending on what your priority is and what kind of capacity and resources you have available at hand where you live. Because again, the shovel-ready, although we would adapt that a little bit to say shovel-worthy projects, things that are really ready to roll are going to be a priority from a funding perspective. And to that point, you can't really let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
I would just add, remember too that there's funding for things in all major categories. So all of you ICLEI members or anyone who's doing an ICLEI inventory or any inventory, recognize you're looking at your buildings, your transportation systems, your wastewater treatment systems, et cetera. And so there are specific pots of money for wastewater treatment facilities or focusing on transportation emissions. So there's a lot of money out there and there are a lot of programs to access that money. Buildings certainly are important, but for many of our ICLEI communities, at least transportation is pretty significant as well.
Dave, on that same topic, when looking at programs that might be funded, what kind of programs have you seen or what kind of programs have you implemented for a stock of different government buildings that have had the highest return on investment? What's really going to pop in the spreadsheet when putting together an application for one of these block grants?
Well, one of the ways that we see achieving getting the interest and getting the dollars in is to look at integrated strategies where you're not just coming in and doing one measure, taking one approach. You're looking at the overall footprint and devising an integrated strategy that includes efficiency, on-site generation, renewables, and where you have benefits that reach 50-60% savings. In one case we worked on, which has received a fair bit of funding, is a town in New Jersey where just that kind of integrated approach resulted in a 80% reduction in on-site energy requirements through efficiency, through renewables, and through cogeneration. This is for an integrated campus of municipal buildings, high school, elementary school. So, and I might be biased because that's where we see achieving sort of the greatest impact. Any kind of program that uses biofuels and biomass, creative on-site generation strategies, smart microgrids, These are the kinds of areas where we think money can be attracted, but not exclusively. But those are some of the areas we've seen be successful in attracting dollars.
Great.
It's basically about impact. Yep.
Someone asked a question that I've been curious about, and I'm going to ask it slightly differently than they did, but I think we'll get to the same answer, and this is for Missy and Michelle. What's the best way to organize on a regional level in terms of it putting together a strategy, creating an inventory, and really putting together a climate action plan? And are there any best practices or cases that you've seen that really stand out that folks could go and use as a reference model for how a whole region took an integrated approach among all of the different entities of government, different types of government that were out there?
Yeah, this is Missy.
Yeah, I'll let you take that one first.
Okay. Throwing me under the bus, Michelle. I like it. Yeah, let's get a stab at that. So what we generally see is at all of those levels, at the local level / county level, and at the regional level, and even at the state level, everyone has very different authority, and they can do very different things. So we know at the local level, for example, cities, towns, villages, et cetera, can implement building codes in many states, or they can do smart growth policies, et cetera. So they can have a lot of very localized impact. We also know when we go to the transportation system, we generally need to start thinking more regionally. So we know that we need to work on all scales, and they need to collaborate. We generally, our membership and what we focus on is that local level. So the cities, towns, villages, boroughs, and counties, those are our members. Those are the ones that we have the resources to help move through this process. We do partner with some regional entities that really take it to that next scale. And some examples I would put out there are the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. They did a regional inventory, and they were one of the very first regional inventories that I know of that's actually been done, and they worked with the EPA because there is no standard for what a regional inventory looks like. ICLEI works with the Climate Registry, the California Air Resources Board, and some other stakeholders to develop a standard for local government inventories. So we know how to do a local government inventory, but a regional inventory, no one's really stepped up to the plate at that level. So what they did, the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, is they attempted to go through what a regional inventory would look like, and then they pieced it out at the municipal level, and they basically did community inventories for all of the communities in their regional planning commission. And so that way what they did then is they could go to all of the hundreds of members and say, here's a community inventory for you. Your job now, because obviously you want to institutionalize that thinking at the local level, is you've got to do the government operations portion. So you have to do two inventories, an inventory of your internal operations and an inventory of the entire community if we put a bubble over you, so your residential transportation. This way, they had the community portion, but they didn't have their internal portion. And so they would go ahead and move forward, and they sort of met halfway. And then they could have a regional strategy and regional plans, having it be parsed off with what the region is going to do, what the counties are going to do, and what the local governments are going to do. As an example. And it is one of the most advanced examples that I know of.
One of the things I've also seen done is really a climate impact review where folks who are experts in how climate change is going to impact the locality put together some different scenarios and give a sense of who's going to be impacted most and how much. We had a person who was applying to be in the audience who was concerned about sea level change because they live in a coastal area in Florida. And when you look at it from that perspective, you're going to have communities, you're going to have affinity groups, you're going to have folks who are naturally going to want to work together to make sure that they've addressed the potential issues. And I think that's an alternative to going at it from the pure inventory side. And I say that from an organizing principle. I've read the Delaware Valley Plan. We'll also make sure that that's posted on the resources page. But it's tough to sort of say, okay, well, who's going to be in charge? Who's going to lead? If you look at it from the impact point of view, it's pretty clear. You'll see farmers who are going to want to join together. You'll see real estate developers are going to want to join together and work with their counterparts in government to really make improvements. Michelle, anything to add to that?
I think that the examples and the strategies that you guys have mentioned are far beyond any specifics that I'm aware of. And the only thing that I would mention, or the only thing that I would add, is that we've seen enormous positive results come from even informal collaborations at the regional level, or even at sort of at a bioregional level, where you have jurisdictions that are not necessarily adjacent, but that have a very similar set of environmental and climatic issues that they're dealing with because of just sort of where they are, and what the top of the priority list is, just by sharing best practices and also having an open dialogue that creates opportunities for collaboration that one party or the other may simply not have been aware of. So I just wouldn't discount. I wouldn't discount the value of informal collaboration as well.
Great. We have one last question that we can get to before the end of the call in a couple minutes, and it's a great question, I think, for both Michelle and Missy, which is, can individuals join your organizations, and how do they go about doing that?
This is Michelle from USGBC, and individuals are welcome and wanted very much as members of our chapter organizations. So organizations join the national USGBC, individuals join local chapters. You can actually find a complete listing of our chapters with contact information and even enroll online from usgbc.org. And individual members of the chapter are eligible to serve on the board of directors, other local leadership committees, and advance new programs, collaborate with national, serve on our regional councils, and typically the fee for membership is no more than $60 a year.
And on the ICLEI side, this is Missy, individuals can actually not join ICLEI. Our only members are local governments, and that's a very strict mandate that we've got from ICLEI International. That doesn't mean that that individuals can't be involved in ICLEI in some capacity. The most important way is in the local government once it's a member of ICLEI, either helping it to become a member or once it has officially joined, volunteering your time to help move them through the 5 milestones and towards climate protection and sustainable development. And there are lots of ways to do that through attending webinars or regional events, getting trained on how to do inventories. We provide all of those resources once your local government officially becomes a member. But for us, and I said this I think 2 or 3 times, really truthfully, the most important thing is the institutionalization of this thinking in the local government so that it's not something additional. They always think about climate protection and they always think about sustainability. So to do that, we need to have the local government be our member.
Well, great. Thank you, everyone, for being on the call. Thank you to our panelists for answering everyone's questions. Jim, thank you to you and the Harvard folks, all the folks at the Kennedy School and the Ash Institute, and the Government Innovators Network. I think this has been a great call, and I hope everyone feels it's successful as well.
Thank you so much, Gerry, and thank you, Jim.
Thank you both.
Thank you, guys.
Jim, anything else, or are we signed off at this point?
No, I believe that's it. Thanks very much to the panel and Gerry for helping plan this whole thing.
That's fantastic. I have to say, Jim, you're a total wizard with Microsoft Live meetings, for pulling up all the websites and resources we were talking about. It was pretty awesome to watch the screen. So, thank you.
We not only recorded that, but broadcasted that to everybody, and I'm glad we did. So I want everyone to take note of that. Thank you.
Fantastic.
I appreciate it.
Very cool.
Thank you, everyone.
This is definitely this is a great success, and I'll try to be more detailed about what I mean by that in a follow-up email. But in the meantime, everybody, and take care.
Thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.